Linnea has very interesting investment options. She has a weapon that buffs your whole team and gives you massive amounts of damage increases to yourself too. And she also has a lot of constellations that buff all of your team's crit damage and also buff her own damage. So before you waste your primogems, in this video I'll show you the right way you should invest in Linnea. Depending on your situation, should you start by going for the weapon first or going straight to her constellations. Also, if you're trying to be more efficient and grab Linnea's constellations and weapon for cheaper, I would recommend getting Genshin crystals from Topuplive. Topuplive offers top-ups for many games including Genshin Impacts up to 30% cheaper than official stores. For example, this offer costs $100 on Genshin's official game store, but only costs $72.86 on Topuplive, allowing you to save more than $27. When you'd want to buy, you'd want to click my link in the description or the pinned comment to make sure you get the best deals possible. Then if you see your country at the top, for example here you have USA, then you'd want to click it. If not, you can just use the global one. Then just click the offer you want, type your user ID and region, then click on buy now, pay, and Genesis crystals will shortly be on your account. It also uses PCI security, which means it's 100% safe. And you can also get an additional 12% off by using my code Camilo. Use the link in the description or the pinned comment to find those great deals at Topuplive. Alright, so starting off with her signature weapon, Golden Forstbound Oath. That's going to be a new 5-star bow in the game. At level 90, it's going to have 542 base attack, and it's going to give you 88% crit damage. Obviously, that's going to be considered low base attack and a high substat for a 5-star weapon, which is pretty good for Linnea. She doesn't really care about the base attack. Now, from the passive, this weapon can give you 16% defense, and then when the equipping character's elemental skill or lunar crystallized hit enemies, it's going to increase your Geo damage by 40%, which is a huge increase, and it's also going to increase your lunar crystallized damage by 40% for the equipping character. For that case, that's going to be Linnea. And then when this effect is active, if there are moon drifts near the equipping character, which will be very easy in most of Linnea's teams, it's going to give half of the previous effect to all of your party members. So it's going to increase their Geo damage by 20% and lunar crystallized damage by another 20%. That's going to be a very good and a huge support option, especially from a weapon, especially considering the type of teams Linnea is going to be played in. Pretty much all of them are going to benefit from this effect. The damage increase from this weapon is obviously going to depend on which weapon you had before, but usually it's going to be around a 17% damage increase from like the premium other options like the Aqua Simulacra, for example, or the Hunter's Path. Like other S tier weapons, I did a weapons tier list before if you want to check it out for Linnea, and it's going to be around a 22% damage increase from like more free to play options like the Slingshot, for example, or more like just A tier weapons in general. But I mean, everyone's going to have R5 Slingshot, so that's like the lowest you can get basically. The difference is pretty small even from like premium weapons and the Slingshot. It's simply because she doesn't really care about base attack, which is like the biggest difference between 5-star and 3-star weapons, which is good, I guess, for free plays. But yeah, her signature weapon is going to be a decent increase from other options, but also nothing really super special at the same time, in my opinion. I'd say it's an average weapon, especially for a support character in general. It's not like necessary for her to function or anything like that. Alright, now moving on to her constellations, I'm going to explain them simply, very quick, so you quickly understand what do they do, and then I'll give you how much damage they're going to give you in general. So C1 is that you're going to be getting some stacks after you use your elemental skill, or when you trigger like the Moondrift Harmony, which is like the third hit after your team already triggers 2 lunar crystallized reactions. But you're going to be getting some stacks, and then you can use these stacks to buff the lunar crystallized reaction damage of your party members. The damage increase is going to be additive, so it's almost like Shinha's damage increase for cryo damage, for example, or Yunjin's damage increase for normal attacks. That's going to be the same thing for lunar crystallized damage. It's going to be increasing it by 75% of Linnea's defense. So let's say, for example, Zibai deals her own lunar crystallized damage. 75% of Linnea's defense is going to be added to that. So it's just additive damage increase, and you have 18 stacks of that. And that's actually pretty good because a lot of your hits are going to be buffed. Also, when Linnea herself deals like her ultimate crush hit thing with Lumi in her ultimate power form, she consumes 5 stacks and gets additional damage for that hit equal to 150% of her defense. So this constellation is basically just a support constellation that buffs your teammates damage by a little bit, which is 75% of Linnea's defense, and then also buffs Linnea's own sub DPS damage by a more considerable amount. In general, in like her most popular teams, this constellation is going to be around like a 13% damage increase team wide, which is pretty decent, but also not like super good. Now, C2 is that after unleashing Moondrift's Harmony, which is the Geo third hit thing of the Lunar Crystallize that I talked about before. It's just in any Lunar Crystallize team, after you trigger 3 Lunar Crystallize reactions, the third one is just going to be a Moondrift Harmony, which is a little bit extra damage. When you do that in a team where Linnea is present, all your Geo and Hydra party members are going to gain a 40% crit damage increase, which is super huge. A 40% crit damage increase to all of your party members is going to be super valuable, especially in your main DPS, so that's definitely a huge stat to have. It's also going to give Linnea herself 150% additional crit damage on her ultimate power form hit. So her main hits are going to have an additional 150% crit damage, which is crazy. That's going to make Linnea able to deal nukes, literally, and is going to increase her damage by a lot, plus a 40% additional crit damage increase to all of your Geo and Hydra party members, which are basically all of the characters who are going to be playing with Linnea anyways. That's going to be super huge. This constellation also has a second part, which is the moon sign part. So obviously you'll need a second Nutcry character for you to unlock that. But when you do, it's going to allow you to trigger the Harmony thing more frequently just by using your elemental skill basically. And it's going to consider that all of the characters that are Hydra or Geo applied their elements in the reaction. That basically just ensures you have full uptime on the previous buffs. So you don't have to keep triggering the Moondrift thing. It's basically just going to auto trigger. But yeah, honestly, that's one of the best constellations we've seen in a while. I really like it, especially for C2. It's definitely a super good constellation. Usually in most of our teams, that's going to be around the 28% damage increase, which is super huge. It's definitely above average for C2. So this constellation is definitely going to be pretty good. It's going to buff your own Linnea's damage by a lot, and then also buff your team members, which is everything you need from a support's constellation. Now C3 is just going to buff the level of your elemental skill by 3. Your elemental skill is the biggest part of your damage basically, but it still doesn't really matter as much, honestly. It's just going to increase your multipliers a little bit. Usually that's going to be around like a 4% damage increase, and that's it. Now C4 is that after you trigger the Moondrift Harmony thing, your defense is going to be increased by 25%, and then the active party member's defense is also going to be increased by 25%. And if Linnea is the active party member, she can get both effects for herself and get a 50% defense increase. I mean, it's a decent constellation, I guess, but I'd say honestly, defense in general is considered like a quote-unquote cheap stat because you can get it easily from so many sources. That 25% defense increase is honestly not that much in my opinion, especially from C4. It just kind of meh. Usually it's going to be around a 7% damage increase. Obviously, it depends on the situation and who's getting the buffs and stuff like that. But yeah, that's going to be the range in most of our popular teams. But yeah, I don't really like it that much. C5 is just going to increase the level of your elemental bursts. Her elemental burst multipliers are just going to increase your healing. So yeah, that's basically it. You're just going to be able to heal a little more and that's it. It's going to have a 0% damage increase, but you can heal a little more, I guess. So it's basically a useless constellation. Now finally, C6 is that it's simply just going to buff your first constellation. So it's going to give you 18 initial stacks. So it's just going to max out your stacks basically. And then when the other characters consume stacks, they're going to consume 2 stacks instead of 1. But then it's also going to increase the damage boost by 150%. So it's basically 2.5 times more damage by consuming double the stacks, and then you get more stacks more easily. So it's a pretty good deal, honestly. It's just going to increase the damage increase to your party members by a huge amount, and that's going to result in a lot of damage. The second part of the constellation is going to be a moon sign thing. So if you have a second Nutcry character, lunar crystallized damage dealt by all nearby party members is going to be elevated by 25%. So as we know, elevated is a completely separate multiplier for lunar crystallized damage, and having it 25% elevated is definitely going to be pretty good. But yeah, that's pretty much it about her C6. It's basically just going to buff your C1, more damage increase and more stacks, and then also 25% elevated. Usually it's going to result in around a 41% damage increase, which is pretty decent. I'd say it's an average C6. I like the part that it's also a support constellation. It didn't just attempt to like turn her into a Geo main DPS or something like that. It kept her main role as a support and buffed it, which I really like. I think more support C6s should just do that instead of attempting to turn the character into like a main DPS. So yeah, I do like C6. I don't think it's necessary, but yeah, it's a decent C6. Alright, now moving on to the final conclusion, which should you get first? The answer for that is also going to depend on how much are you going to get and how much are you willing to invest in Linnea. So if you're planning to only get one thing, that means you're planning to just get one single upgrade for Linnea, whether it's C1 or R1 and then that's it. In that case, I would recommend just going for R1. The weapon is going to be more damage increase, not by a lot, but then it's also going to be a separate weapon in your account that you can potentially use on other characters on the future and stuff like that. So getting the weapon is always going to be better than Constellations. options, especially if you're like a low spender or free to play and stuff like that. So if you're only getting one thing for Linnea and you know you're not planning to get anything else anytime soon, I would recommend just getting her weapon and stopping, and that's it. But if you're planning to get more than one thing, so whether it's 2 things or more, in that case I would recommend starting with C1 and then C2. C2 is going to be a super good constellation, and C2 R0 is going to be C1 R1. So going for C1 and then C2 is going to be the right wishing path if you're going for 2 things or more. Obviously after that you can go for R1 then, and then after R1 you can finish the rest of the constellations if you want to invest more in her. So that's the correct wishing path. But I also want to note one thing: investing in Linnea is honestly not that valuable, especially as a sub DPS and support. Her main support capabilities are just in her C0 R0 kit. She's very free to play friendly, and her investment ceiling is really not that high, honestly. So if you're tight on primo gems, or I don't know, you don't really care much about her and stuff like that, honestly I'd recommend just staying at C0 R0. I think she's probably one of the best characters that you can do that for. She doesn't really have any huge or necessary upgrades except like C2, but it's still really not like necessary. Investing in main DPS's constellations like Sibai's constellation for example is definitely going to be more valuable, so I wouldn't really recommend investing too much in Linnea. Obviously unless you have the means to and you really like her, then go for it. If not, I think she's a very free to play character. Just get her, get a free to play weapon, give her good artifacts, and you're probably set. But yeah, that was the video guys. If you enjoyed it, please don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel. See you guys in the next video. Peace.